Let's look at one more. Any modern poet would be thrilled to have his poems compared with Tulsidas. Where do you think the error is? Any modern poet would be thrilled to have his poems compared with Tulsidas. I'm going to give you 10 seconds, see if you're able to identify where the error is. So here, if you pay close attention, the error is in part D. Why? That's because there's comparison happening. But where is the comparison? Between what and what? The poems. Any modern poet would be thrilled to have his poems compared with, not Tulsidas, his poems compared with the poems of Tulsidas, right? Which means I need that clarity to come in. I need the proper, so this is like a dangling modifier, right? This is what we call a dangling modifier. What's a dangling modifier? Which means what I'm trying to modify, that subject is not clear in part D. His poems is what we're trying to compare with, and I'm not comparing. It's like saying if Bittu is a writer, right, and I'm also a writer, I want to compare my poems with Bittu's poems, not I want to compare my poems with Bittu. That is incorrect, no comparison. I can compare myself with Bittu, but my poems I want to compare with his poems, not with Bittu. That doesn't make sense. So this is where a dangling modifier. What is the meaning of dangling modifier? In fact, if you don't know this, I would advise you to go and check out dangling modifier, which is part of there in your basic grammar for reference as a concept. If you don't follow it, please go through that video. Where when I'm comparing, there's some part missing. The person whom I have to modify is dangling. Why? Because it's incomplete. I can't figure out. So part D is where the dangling modifier is. And what do I need to do there? I just have to add compared with those of Tulsidas. Those bringing in clarity, saying his poems. Are you following? So any modern poet would be thrilled to have his poems compared with those of Tulsidas. Those of matlab Tulsidas's poems. Error is in part D. You just add those of. So the construction will be compared with those of Tulsidas, bringing in clarity, saying those of matlab his poems. Whose poems? Tulsidas's poems. No method of making other people agree to your viewpoint is as effective as this method. No method of making other people agree to your viewpoint is as effective as this method. Where do you think the error is? I'm going to give you a clue for this one, okay? Remember, when there is not much clarity, there's comparison happening, right? How do I know that? Because I have the positive degree of comparison, as effective as this method, which means I need to look for a part which is not adding up to the complete meaning of this context. Which part is that? I need to add something because there's comparison happening. What and what is compared? And even the comparison, is there some word? There's always a word missing. When you find that a part is, awkward or incomplete in meaning, because this is a dangling. There is a dangling modifier. Something is missing. Can you identify which part, what is missing? Remember, what is compared? This method to? Yes, the error is in part A. What do I need to add? All I have to do is just add no other method of making other people agree. Remember, what is compared here? Method is what? This method. So, when I'm comparing, I'm saying there is no other method as compared to this method which is making other people agree to your viewpoint. So, basically the context is saying, boss, if you want to make other people agree to your viewpoint, I'm telling you there is no other method than this method that you can use. Right? If I have to put this in context, I'll say, let me rephrase this whole thing. There is no other method than this method, or like in our context saying there is no other method as effective as this method of making people or making other people, whatever, agree to your viewpoint. Got it? There is no other method as effective as this method of making other people agree to your viewpoint. There is no other method than this method as effective as this method. In fact, you'd rather just go with this. As effective as this method of making other people agree to your viewpoint. So the error is in part A. All I need to do is add other, which completes meaning, right? That other brings in the clarity of, okay, completing meaning of the subject method. Just like how we saw, right? Tulsidasa's poems. I needed to add that those, because I'm comparing my poems with those of Tulsidasa's, the poems of Tulsidasa's. Just like that, I'm comparing this method to no other method. Yeah? Are you following? So the dangling modifier error, very, very difficult to identify. Errors pertaining to vocabulary, dangling modifiers, these are quite difficult to identify. Maybe we can look at more of this in our next session. But just so you have an idea of what to look for. She wore a dress to the party that was far more attractive than the other girls. She wore a dress to the party that was far more attractive than the other girls. Where do you think the error is? More, most. But where is, okay. But there is no need for the superlative form most here, right? Because if you look at the context, there is comparison happening between her dress and the dress of the other girls. It's a comparative degree that is needed, and more is rightly so. It brings in that meaning, right? More attractive. But where the error is in part D. And what is that error? To bring in more clarity, like we said, the comparison is between the dress that was attractive. So the comparison is between her dress and the dress of those other girls, not her dress and the other girls. If you look at part D, it says then the other girls, which is incorrect. No, we are not comparing the dress to the girls. We are comparing the dress to the dress of the other girls. So I need to bring in or add something in part D to bring in that clarity. So she wore a dress to the party that was far more attractive than those of the other girls. Where those brings in clarity, saying, hey, we are comparing the dresses and not the girls. Are you following? So this is an error pertaining to dangling modifier. What's a dangling modifier? Where, you know, I have a word missing in the context, and whatever it is that I'm trying to compare, right, is not complete. As in there's incorrect comparison happening. So in the context, if you see, actually the context is bringing the meaning as though they are comparing her dress to the other girls. Incorrect. They are comparing her dress to the dresses of the other girls. Yeah, and that when we add that those in part D, then we understand the meaning, right? So this she wore a dress to the party that was far more attractive than those of the other girls. Got it? Let's look at a couple of more with this particular error type, which is dangling modifier. A lot of them overlook this. First of all, they're not aware that there can be an error like this. Now that you're aware, you need to just look out for this error. The standard of living in India is still lower than most of the other developed countries. Same concept. Let me see if you're able to identify the error, and if you have identified the error, what will you add to complete meaning? Okay, let's attack this question. The standard of, here again, what is compared? The standard is what is compared, right? We are not comparing the standard of living in India to the other developed countries. We are comparing the standard of living in India to the standard of living in the other countries, which means again the error is in part C. Then that of most of the other developed countries, right? So that brings in that we are comparing the standard of living in India to the standard of living in the developed countries. Standard of living is what is compared. Are you following? So the standard of living in India is still lower than that of the standard of living of most of the other developed countries. There we go. Error is in part C. Have you read in the Hindustan Times that Kapil Dev's shoulder was broken while playing the final test against Pakistan? Where do you think the error is? Okay, so let's look at this question. Have you read in the Hindustan Times that Kapil Dev's shoulder was broken while playing? Who was playing? He was playing, right? Otherwise, it looks like the shoulder was playing the final test against Pakistan. So, where is the error? The error is in part C, where what I need to do is I need to add shoulder was broken while he was playing, bringing in the impression that Kapil was the one who was playing and not his shoulder. Yeah, very, very easy to overlook this sort of an error. So, we need to be very careful. Yeah? Are you following? There you go. Otherwise, it gives the impression that shoulder was playing. A recent poll has indicated that Binny is considered brighter than any student in the class. A recent poll has indicated that Binny is considered brighter than any student in the class. Where is the error? Okay, so when you look at this context, a recent poll has indicated that Binny is considered brighter than any other student, right? So the error is in part C, where I add any other student. The comparison is happening with Binny to other students. So that clarity has to come in part C. So all these sort of errors that we've looked at so far are errors pertaining to dangling modifiers. What is a dangling modifier? If you are not familiar with that, go check out the video in under basic grammar for reference. It's available. Basically, where I'm saying is something that has to be modified, right? There is a word missing. So that's why that part or that sentence is incomplete without that word, right? If you looked at all the 4 examples that we looked at, we had to add one word to bring in clarity to complete meaning. Otherwise, it was misleading. It was giving us some other information, right? Some other meaning.